Fitzpatrick takes the snap, drops back, lobs it back right corner. Decker! He's got it! Touchdown! Eric Decker scores! And the Jets have won it in overtime!
This is the Jet Take with Ben Blessington and Kyle Fahey.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jet Take. I'm your host, Ben Blessington. Joining me now, as always, Mr. Money, Kyle Fahey. Kyle, we actually have some stuff to talk about.
We do.
The Jet season is over, as everybody would know by now. We're heading into the Pro Bowl weekend, I guess. But the Jets have had some staff changes after hiring Adam Gase. This is his first set of things to do, and he's done a solid job so far. Just to briefly go over it, then we'll talk about each one and whatnot. He's brought in defensive coordinator Gregg Williams. Kyle, actually, I don't know about Kyle yet, but I'm a big fan of this hire. The most notable part of it is, I guess the former head coaching experience or whatever, but the most notable part is he'll presumably be switching the Jets to a 4-3 defense, which they haven't had in years. So it could be a good thing. And we had talked about, I think it was like 2 years ago on this show, how the Jets would look in a 4-3 defense. Obviously, the personnel's changed a little bit. But we'll talk all about that. And then, in addition, it was officially announced today that Dowell Loggians is officially the Jets offensive coordinator and QB coach. A hire that a lot of people aren't too happy about, but also could be minimalized due to the fact that Adam Gase is calling the plays and this is his offense. And then the last hire that we know of right now, Frank Pollack is the offensive line coach. Was great with the Cowboys for plenty of years, and then became the Bengals offensive line coach and had success there last year. I guess I should add that he's opted to retain Brant Boyer, and we don't know other staff members that he's going to opt to retain. But keep an eye on that, and this next week we should get a better idea as what the whole staff's going to look at. But the big three, I guess we'll have the big four. Big four, retaining Boyer, bringing in Williams, bringing in Loggians, and then bringing in Pollack. And that offensive line position is definitely
very vital.
Important. Yeah, vital. Position coach. You need a guy there that knows what he's doing, and especially when you have a young quarterback. The last thing the Jets need right now is setting Sam Darnold back here and getting hurt and stuff. So a very important hire there, and I'm glad that Adam Gase is, on the surface done a good job so far. But we'll talk all about it. If you'd like to follow our show, you can on Twitter at the Jet Take. That's the best place to keep up with us. I'm on there pretty often. Tweet us right back. We'll respond, whatever. If you want to listen to the show, just search up the Jet Take wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, you can find us on turnofthejets.com. You can find our podcast along with plenty of other great podcasts and written work and just the best Jets content out there. But Kyle, I'll turn it over to you. Adam Gase, one of the things that he really talked about, in his introductory press conference, eyeball emoji, was that he was taking his time with the staff. That was one of the first things that he learned in Miami that he's applying to the Jets is he's not going to rush. He's not going to feel the pressure of having to build a staff as quickly as possible. He's going to take his time. And he didn't say this, but, when Travis was on our show talking about him, he was worried about him hiring, his buddies and whatnot. And so when the Dowell Loggians thing dropped, like right after the Adam Gase hire dropped, it became official today, but we pretty much knew he was going to be offensive coordinator for like 2 weeks now. People were like, oh, here we go again. He's just going to hire his own guys. What are your thoughts on how he's addressed this? How he's actually turned around and brought in two guys that he doesn't have a connection with, but are two very solid football coaches? Do you think he's starting to show some growth in the fact that he knows he can't just hire his buddies and that he's taking his time and vetting all the possible options?
Well, I think for one, this shows that Adam Gase, for as young as he is and for as critical as the players have been, he can bring in people who he is not, buddy with, like Dowell Loggians. Gregg Williams is, a very stern, we'll say, how do I put this, stubborn man. So I imagine negotiating with him and getting him to, bend towards your will is hard to do. And Frank Pollack is a proven offensive line coach in the NFL who has had success basically everywhere he's went. He's a savvy veteran in the coaching game, and it shows that he's willing to come and work for such a young head coach by NFL standards. It shows that at some points Adam Gase has earned respect throughout the NFL coaching community, and I think it's going to benefit the team long term. As far as Dowell Loggians, Adam Gase is going to be calling the plays, so it really is whatever in terms of the offensive coordinator position. But the quarterback coach title also in there, I'm not sure how I feel about that because, obviously the amounting Ryan Tannehill film has shown that they really did jack shit in Miami for about 3 years. I think 2 together with Dowell and Gase and Tannehill. It wasn't good, but I think Sam is going to be good anyway. Regardless of really who's coaching him, he just has the natural talent. So I guess there's nothing we can do about it, basically. I mean, that's the reality behind it. If you're upset about it, I'm sorry. There's nothing you can do about it, and I think Sam's going to be fine either way, so don't stress too much about it. And then Gregg Williams coming in as a defensive coordinator, I think he's one of the better defensive coordinators in recent NFL history in terms of production. He's one of those top 10 guys. He's in there with, Rex Ryan and the calibers of that who are not great head coaches, but definitely know how to call a defense, definitely know how to look at talent. And, you just look at some of the teams that Williams has coached with, the Browns defense last year. Some people would argue that they were number 1 in the league. They were definitely in top 5 throughout most of the season, and that was with a rookie corner who was the number 4 pick in Denzel Ward. You're asking him to take the number 1 spot. Jabril Peppers is, an iffy safety. I mean, it's not like he had immense, incredible talent. Obviously, Myles Garrett is a phenomenal talent on the defensive line, but Gregg Williams has done well basically everywhere, and hey, I'm always the type of guy to scream, go for his knees when I'm, watching the Jets play someone, so me and Gregg Williams are going to get along well. And as I said earlier about Frank Pollack, the offensive line, he's just proven he's one of those guys who knows how to get the offensive line to perform well. The Bengals, they've produced guys like Andrew Whitworth in the past couple of years, who is now with the Rams and about to go compete for a Super Bowl. And, he's been working with guys like that basically his whole career, earlier in Dallas, in Cincinnati. So he's just a proven guy that I like to see get brought in and hopefully work on the offensive line. So all these hires, besides Dowell Loggians, who it's whatever, but I can't really complain. I like all these hires. These are hires that I would probably make myself. So kudos to Adam Gase. I think we're slowly starting to waffle on him.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the how we've rationalized Gase to ourselves, and part of it's fan speech, part of it is backed up by some truth. But before we just hop into that, you kind of talked a little bit about Dowell Loggians and bringing in his friends and kind of the hires that you would make and whatnot. Yeah, as far as Dowell goes, I think some people are, first of all, people like to pick on him for his appearance because he looks a little bit like Patton Oswalt, and I get that. But for Gase, this is Gase's offense. And so Gase is going to bring in his guy. It's annoying unless the Jets are winning. And what I mean by that is, look, Adam Gase is going to be calling all the plays. He's going to be doing the majority of the game planning. I mean, he's going to be in there with Darnold. I mean, he's pretty much said that he's essentially, I don't know if this is a great thing, but this is the model that the Rams have and other teams now, that he essentially said he's ignoring the defense. I know he's going to have some say in it, but he basically just said, I want a head coach for the defense, which Gregg Williams gets to have his head coaching title, basically. And so he just wants to focus on Sam, especially now. And maybe if the Jets, become successful, by the time Sam's been in the league for 4 or 5 years, he could be more of a head coach and less, one-on-one with Darnold. But especially this early in his career, I think it's a good move to have him directly there. So Dowell, I don't necessarily think this is just him hiring his buddy as much as it is hiring a guy who knows his system, a guy who knows exactly what he wants. He's just going to do everything. And one of the biggest concerns me and you, Kyle, had about on the show about bringing in a guy like Adam Gase, and this is kind of turning into the waffling topic that you brought in towards the end, was how much did Ryan Tannehill hinder him? And that was the thing that was the only kind of lurking question, because on the surface, his offenses weren't that good. Somebody who did a really good job that has kind of helped me adjust to the hire, I guess, and kind of start to have some optimism about it was Joe Blewett. You can go follow. I got to pull up his Twitter in a second, but he has a film podcast. Yeah. He's a film aficionado. But he was kind of breaking down. What is it, Joe? Joe RB31. If you want to be a smarter football fan, go follow him there. But he kind of did a whole I think game thread or kind of some Gase plays, and he went over the weaknesses. And I mean, from his eye, and I trust Joe's eye because I mean he knows more about film than probably 99.9% of people who are on NFL Twitter. And he just talked about how Ryan Tannehill hindered him. I mean, obviously Gase has his issues, but Joe is actually fairly impressed with the X's and O's and thought he actually was quite creative and innovative. He fell into some problems. One of the things that he mentioned was he would run a play that would work, maybe a halfback pass or whatever, and then he'd almost outsmart himself and completely ignore it and just go to keep something else or whatever, instead of either bringing that look back and running something new so the defense is on his toes, or forcing the defense to stop something that they've proven they can't stop. But about the X's and O's with Gase and his offense, I'm feeling a lot better after watching Joe Blewett, kind of go through his tapes and whatnot, and then reading more about Adam Gase. So offensively, I'm actually okay with the hire now. I'm a fan. Then there was the whole press conference, and everybody was worried because he looked like a robot. I don't know if that's just some people have their twitches and different things. I don't know if that was him just he has something, or he was just trying to look serious or whatever. It was odd, but I will say if you go watch him on Michael Kay or Mike Francesca or Dan Le Batard, he does have a personality. He's not just this honestly, even Todd Bowles showed less of a personality in those type of things. But I mean, he shows he has a sense of humor and whatnot. And then the last part that we were all concerned about was so we've kind of covered his poor offense. Then we talked about he's just kind of is he really that inspiring? And then there was all the people that the players, I guess, that when he was fired that were celebrating it. And then there's this whole movement of people saying the players all hated Adam Gase. I will say that since being hired, there's been numerous people, including Alshon Jeffrey, who thinks Sam Darnold's going to be an MVP and win Super Bowls, who have come out in support of Adam Gase and in support of him as a coach. And so it really comes down to this. The Jets have brought in, with Williams and Gase, two no BS guys who, if you're not going to buy into the system, they're going to be on their way. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see quite a few trades this offseason. Not only just to fit the Jets 4-3 scheme, that's my next question to ask after we talk about this a little bit, but just guys who don't buy in. And I go back and forth on it, but it's a good thing. I mean, how many times have we heard about players missing meetings and just looking sloppy and unprepared and just not even looking like they're trying? When Jamal says we want dogs, what the Jets have done is they've gotten two guys who are going to create dogs, whether you like it or not. So, Kyle, I mean, just kind of your thoughts on how you've rationalized the Gase hire, because, our last episode we were not really for it, not really for an Adam Gase coach Jets team, but I've kind of come around on it. I'm kind of excited. I think he does have a really creative offense. I think, I do like that he's had head coaching experience, that I think he's going to be better off, and I do really think that Ryan Tannehill hindered him, and I'm excited to see him kind of let his offense go a little bit more with a guy like Sam Darnold and getting to grow him younger. But, Kyle, your thoughts on rationalizing Adam Gase?
I think you got to look at the positives in terms of who he's hired, and we all know that, he's been considered a bright offensive mind, and I think Joe did a really good breakdown on Twitter on the things that he does well, utilizing players. We're going to be seeing a lot of screens. We're going to be seeing a lot of motions, trying to confuse the defense. I mean, due to, I guess, himself, he did lose a lot of talent. Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker, Jay Ajayi, Ryan Tannehill goes down for a season and a half, basically. You're losing a decent quarterback, two Pro Bowl receivers for the most part, and a Pro Bowl running back at the time. Jay Ajayi obviously has declined, but Jay Ajayi was a Pro Bowler in Miami. And we saw what that offense was like when you take away those good players. And Adam Gase is inheriting a very young Sam Darnold, who I think will be good, Quincy Newell, Robbie Anderson, who are good pieces, Chris Herndon, who looks to be a good piece, and the running back position, it's all over the place right now. You really don't know what you have. Hopefully Le'Veon Bell. So to rationalize, I guess, the positives of this, we're going to hope that we sign Le'Veon Bell, and we're going to hope that Gase continues to show creativity and to utilize the speed of his players with guys like Jakeem Grant, like he did in Miami. He used them frequently in offense this year before he was out for the year, and just hoping that he's more creative.
Yeah, no, undoubtedly. I think that, again, as we said, a lot of this is rationalization, but I do think that there was a large contingent of Jets fans who just kind of swept Adam Gase off because we did the Dolphins cast off of a head coach, and he's easily been memed after that press conference and whatnot. But if you dig deeper, I can see this hire having some success. And then you have to factor in that the Jets did a wide, extensive search, and I don't want to say they have the pick of the litter, but they did really have the choice of pretty much of the market who they wanted. And they chose Gase, and so you have to kind of, not that Mike Kagan has given us too much of a reason to trust him. You have to kind of like his, rapport with Sam Darnold and his vision that he sold him on. All right, let's talk a little bit about Gregg Williams, because we talked plenty about Adam Gase last week. We're buying in slowly on the hire. I can get behind it, and let's hope the Jets have some success behind him. But his most important coaching staff hire was Gregg Williams, bar none. Me and you said it. We want a guy who has head coaching experience, who, obviously vast coaching experience, been in the league a long time, and is going to, can just be the head coach of that defense. And that's what Adam Gase wanted, and that's what he gets in Gregg Williams, who is a top defensive mind, does have head coaching experience, and was only fired. Wasn't really even fired. Was just kind of parted ways with the Browns. But he had him on, what were they, 5-2 with him as the interim head coach, and then before that, when he was their defensive coordinator, they were top 10 in DVOA, I believe, and like up there in turnovers and sacks and whatnot. So the biggest thing with Gregg Williams, obviously, we know he's going to be a hard ass and going to be loud, and which is kind of exciting to see the Jets defense maybe get a spark in them. But switching to a 4-3, Kyle, what are your thoughts on this? Who does this bode well for, and who does this not bode well for? How are the Jets going to change their whole front seven this offseason? Are we going to see guys this season that are playing out of position? Just kind of your whole thoughts on the switch from a 3-4 to a 4-3 under a guy like Gregg Williams.
I think the players that's going to benefit most are Leonard Williams, for one, getting more people around him, basically, as long as we get the job done in free agency. And then Darren Lee, who I think would sell in the 4-3 pretty easily as the off-ball coverage linebacker who, in certain times, will still have the ability to make his own decisions and progress as a player, just, getting after the quarterback, being able to call things out, and then dropping into coverage, which he did pretty well this year. I think players it's going to affect. Avery Williamson, I was trying to think about it. I guess he's going to be in that Mike role for right now, but I don't think that coverage role really suits him the best, and that's kind of going to be his responsibility. So I don't know. He's a good linebacker. I just don't know if he's best for that role, and I don't see him as a strong side, and I think Lee is going to sit at a weak side right now. So I don't really know what Avery Williamson is going to do. I would hope that there is some sort of role for him in this defense, but athletically we saw him struggle keeping up with players in coverage, and he was great in the run game, and I don't know where that puts him in a 4-3 where the run game is predominantly going to be stopped by the four players up front. So, and he's not a great pass rusher. So he just ends up in the middle, and that's a coverage duty, and he's not great at it. So I'm concerned about him. Marcus May, you're probably just going to see him playing center field is what it looks like based off everything I've seen in Gregg Williams' defense, which I guess is good. He's got good speed. And I guess that means he's not going to be as close with many tackles, and he could stay healthier for a longer amount of time, because that's been a struggle. But I think Jamal Adams, just from having a guy like Gregg Williams who preaches consistency, who preaches just 100% effort at all times, they're going to click. That's going to be one of those coaches that you want in your locker rooms. And I think overall for the Jets defense, it's going to be good. And, you're not going to see defensive linemen slouching around after contracts and stuff. So I think it's going to be good.
Yeah,
everybody.
You kind of talked about it. So yeah, in the 4-3, you have, obviously the ends are going to be a little smaller, but you kind of predicate it on speed and agility, and then inside you have a nose in most 4-3s. And in Gregg Williams, you have a nose tackle and a defensive tackle, and so Leonard Williams is going to be the defensive tackle, and the Jets are going to need to find a nose tackle. They could bring back Steve McClendon, and he could fill that role. He is a vocal leader in the locker room, but he is up there in age, and we're switching head coaches, so I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come back. The Jets could look at guys like Grady Jarrett, Sheldon Richardson, other guys deeper in free agency or in the draft. They also do have Nathan Shepard and Mike Pennell on the roster, to see Pennell especially, to see if they could potentially fulfill that nose tackle role. As far as the 4-3 defensive ends that we just kind of talked about. But, yeah, Leonard Williams is going to benefit for sure as a 4-3 defensive tackle. I think that's where you'll see him have his most success. On the ends, though, it's, we don't really know what's going to happen there. It is a good year to add one. There's plenty of guys in free agency. Obviously, everybody's talking about Flowers for New England. There's also, if a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence were to wiggle free, he won't. Jadeveon Clowney. Who's the other guy? Frank Clark from Seattle. I think he might, wiggle free. So I think you're going to be able to add at least a top 4-3 defensive end in free agency, and then also in the draft, you could look at a guy like, Clelin Ferrell. if the Jets trade down or if his stock keeps rising, you could take him or any of the other top, edge rushers in the drafts. I think what you're going to end up seeing is I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets, sign a top, the 4-3 defensive end in free agency. Let's say they get Frank Clark, and then they draft one in the draft. Let's say they trade down and take Clelin Ferrell. And then you're looking at two pretty solid pass rushers and a great defense. As far as the linebackers go, yeah, you touched on it. Avery Williamson is a 3-4 middle linebacker, and he did a great job last year doing that. The problem is on a 4-3, can he really be the Mike, where he's going to have more coverage responsibility? He's not going to have a guy right next to him. So that's a question, and I wonder if the Jets are going to just leave him there, or maybe they'll try to move him over to the Sam linebacker, the strong side linebacker, and see if he can play there. I think that's a pretty likely scenario given the contract that he got 2 years ago. I think he's going to be on this team, and I don't think the Jets want him as just a 2-down linebacker. So I think what you'll see happen is he'll become the stand linebacker. You already talked about Darren Lee as a great fit, in the, as a will linebacker, the weak side linebacker, going to utilize his athleticism and coverage, and then the Jets are going to have to find a Mike linebacker. That's the way I kind of look at it. And so, whether that's in the draft, you don't really want to give that Mike linebacker spot to a rookie. So that also makes me think maybe they kind of tough it out with Avery Williamson there. I don't know. It is a little, confusing as to see what the Jets can do, but it's exciting because if they play their cards out this offseason, they could have a really, really good defense. Secondary-wise, I still think they need to add another corner or two. But, yeah, as you mentioned, Marcus May going to be playing that deep safety. I'm excited to watch Jamal play, his role in this 4-3 defense. But, yeah, they're going to have to add two ends, a nose tackle, potentially, and a Mike linebacker at the very minimum. And then another guy, just really briefly, we should talk about that doesn't fit this because there are some guys we didn't mention. Henry Anderson, the Jets tackle year last year. That's the reason he left the Colts was injury. It wasn't injury and wasn't going to fit a 4-3 scheme. It wasn't lack of production. And, so he probably won't be re-signed.
3 sacks in 2 years is lack of production.
Yes, but it wasn't like he missed a bunch of games and, was still being productive. And, Leonard Williams has how many sacks in this season. My point is, Kyle, he wasn't let go because he was bad. He was let go because he didn't fit the scheme and he was injured. I'm not saying he was, this was obviously his best year. But yeah, he doesn't really fit a 4-3 because he's too small to be, inside in the interior, and then he's too big to be a 4-3 defensive end. So they could bring him back maybe as a rotational guy, but probably would be wiser just to save the money and get a guy who fits the scheme. Jordan Jenkins is the other guy that I want to talk about because we already talked about Avery Williams. And Jordan Jenkins, 2 years ago, we talked about him maybe being a 4-3 defensive end. And if the Jets don't get one in the draft or in one in the free agency, or if one of those guys, they don't feel is as good, you're as, a first-round pick or whatever, I could see Jordan Jenkins being forced to play the 4-3 defensive end. He does have some talent. He is a role player. He's never going to be your, Terrell Suggs. He's never going to be your, amazing pass rusher or whatever. I don't know why Terrell Suggs was the guy that popped in my head, but he's the guy who does the dirty work, and so he's either going to be brought back or he'll be traded. But given that this is 3-4 to 4-3 in 1 year, I wouldn't be surprised if you're seeing guys like Avery Williamson still playing the Mike or move to the Sam, or seeing a guy like Jordan Jenkins starting as a 4-3 defensive end and Mike Pennell as the 4-3 nose tackle and whatnot, just to focus so that they can get their 4-3 defensive end in the draft or free agency or whatever. But yeah. Kind of a confusing switch and whatnot, but one that's exciting. All right, Kyle, let's wrap it up really quickly. I just want to get your thoughts. We kind of touched on Gase and Loggians. We talked a little bit about Pollack and what a good hire that was, and Williams, and we're excited about how Gase is building this staff, and we'll obviously have more throughout the offseason comes. We get through Senior Bowl week. We have the Combine, the new unis, free agency draft, whatever. We have a lot planned for this offseason, Kyle, but obviously the most important game of the entire year is this Sunday, the Pro Bowl. Kyle, your prediction for Jamal Adams, Jason Myers, and Andre Roberts. Last time of technically 2018.
Predictions. Jason Myers, 6 extra points, 1 field goal. Andre Roberts, I don't know, like 50 return yards, and Jamal Adams, 10 tackles.
I like it. Yeah, I'm going to go pick 6 for Jamal Adams. And
no, not going to happen.
kick return touchdown for Andre Roberts, and flawless for Jason Myers. That's the prediction right there. All right. Well, that'll do it for us. Quick little brief show here on the Jet Take. You might see a little more of these kind of briefer, just kind of talking about the 1 or 2 news pieces we have until we get more toward trades and see or whatnot. But you can follow me on Twitter at Ben W. Blessington. You can follow Kyle at Kyle Fahey NFL. You can follow our show at the Jet Take, or just search up the Jet Take wherever you listen to podcasts. Really excited to keep bringing you guys content this off season, and especially as we get more into the heat of things. Should be fun. Line up some interviews and have callers on and stuff. So it'll be a fun off season. We'd like to thank all of you guys for tuning in this season, and obviously I think we're a few weeks late on saying this, but we just like to thank everybody for following us and joining us during that 2018 season. We were really excited, for what's coming next and to watch our show grow. So that'll do it for us. We'll leave you with the best chant in the National Football League if I can find it. Everybody have a nice week, and go Jets.